So welcome back to session 2 of our PBIS for All webinar series, hosted in partnership by the Supporting Innovative Practices, Open Access, and California PBIS. In our first session, we grounded ourselves in why inclusive PBIS matters, exploring how systems shape access, belonging, and outcomes for all learners, particularly students with disabilities. Today, we take the next step, moving from understanding why to examining how. Tier 1 systems are often described as universal, but universal does not automatically mean accessible. If expectations, instruction, and supports are designed for a narrow range of learners, then many students are still required to adapt to the system rather than the system adapting to them. So today's focus is what it means to intentionally design Tier 1 PBIS through a universal design for learning lens. My name is Janelle Mercado, and I'm the Assistant Director for Supporting Innovative Practices. I'm honored to be joined with our partners from Open Access and California PBIS, along with our SIP program specialists who are here to support your learning. A quick few reminders about logistics. This session will be recorded and will be available on our SIP YouTube channel soon after the event. A link will also be added to the home base document. All resources, including your certificate of completion, will also be available on the home base document. As you can see, ASL interpretation and closed captioning are available. You can also customize the view of your screen to support your engagement. We invite you to engage through the session using the chat to share reflections, connections, and insights. At the end of today's session, we're going to host a Q&A, so please make sure you drop any of those questions in the chat as we're moving along, because we have team members who will be collecting them for our Q&A at the end of the session. As we begin, consider this reflection. When students struggle to meet behavioral expectations, do we first examine the learner, or do we examine the design of the environment? UDL reminds us that barriers are often embedded in the design, not in the learner. When we apply this thinking to PBIS, Tier 1 becomes a powerful lever for equity, clarity, and belonging. And with that, I'll turn it over to our partners from Open Access and California PBIS.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're thrilled to be back for part 2 of the series. My name's Patty Shutter. I am a board certified behavior analyst and program coordinator with the Placer County Office of Education, and we are the Region 3 lead for California PBIS. Emily, you want to say hi?
Yeah, my name is Emily Desjardins. I'm one of the UDL AT content leads with the Open Access Project, and we're housed at the Placer County SELPA.
And this webinar is being supported and brought to you by California PBIS and Open Access and Supporting Innovative Practices as a collaboration to share some strategies to help you with your inclusion of all students. This is session 2 of a 3-part series. We held session 1 back in February and did an overview of why inclusive PBIS matters. Today, we're going to be digging into designing and teaching expectations for access. And the third and final date for this series is next week, March 25th, where we're going to be looking at responding with purpose. Our objectives for today's session, we want participants to be able to explain how to integrate universal design for learning and positive behavior supports to create Tier 1 expectations that are accessible to all learners, and to apply universal design for learning to the design of lessons that reduce barriers and increase access. And we want to start with an inclusive welcome. This is going to be a chat waterfall where we'll ask you to watch this video and imagine that you're driving or crossing the street in this intersection. Think of just one word that describes how you might feel. And we're going to ask you to type it in the chat, but don't hit enter until we say go. So think of a word that describes how you would feel if you were one of those pedestrians trying to cross or a driver trying to get through that intersection. Type that word in the chat and go. I'm seeing anxious, scared, nervous, overwhelmed, confused. Yeah. A lot of anxious, a lot of anxiety, tired. Yeah, it would be exhausting trying to figure out how to do that. Intimidated. I reminded somebody of the game Frogger. Thank you, my generation. Very cautious, unsure. Great. Now, think of what might make the expectations here more clear in this intersection. What are some things that might make the expectations more clear? And you can type your thoughts in the chat for that one too. Signals, rules, lanes for the cars, lines that delineate where to go, where to be. Visuals, signs, traffic lights. There's a reason that we have all of those things in place to be able to support people understanding what to do in intersections. And the number one reason is because it keeps it safe. And safe is a really important word for us to keep in mind today, because that's exactly what the expectations that are put in place within your PBIS systems should do. They should help students, adults, anyone on campus feel safe because they know what to expect. They know what to do. They aren't trying to figure out how to get through the school day without knowing where those lines and where those expectations and those boundaries are. So thank you for doing that with us, and just keep that feeling in mind and those things that would make you feel safe in this intersection in mind as we go through the presentation today. So in our last session, we went over a little bit about PBIS and helped you all understand what PBIS is, and that the design of PBIS is intended to teach clear and consistent expectations, to promote positive and predictable environments, and to support student behavior and engagement. We also went over a little bit of the basics of universal design for learning, and explained that it provides multiple ways for students to engage, perceive, and show their understanding. It's intended to support learner variability, and it reduces barriers to learning for all students. We also talked about how important it is to pair universal design for learning with PBIS. And some of those reasons are that it really ensures the expectations are accessible to every student. It helps to promote engagement and belonging across all learners, and it helps to move PBIS from kind of a one-size-fits-most to a more flexible and inclusive system that supports all learners. And it helps to create those predictable, positive environments where all students can really thrive. So how do we make PBIS work for all? Well, the first way is to focus on whether your students with disabilities actually have full access to the full continuum of PBIS supports, including Tier 1 supports, and the proactive instruction of the social, emotional, and behavioral skills that are being taught and expected of all students on campus. We also want to make sure that we're reframing discipline disparities for students with disabilities as a systems access issue and a design issue, not as a result of individual student behavior problems, but that we're doing, just like Janelle said at the beginning, really thinking about the design of our systems and how they might be either supporting the social emotional skills or perhaps maybe triggering or creating some of the challenges that certain students have. We also want to make sure that special education eligibility is not the way to get into advanced tiers of support. and that we have advanced tiers of supports available to any student in need, and that students with disabilities have a full access to Tier 1 as well as the advanced tiers of intervention. So UDL and PBIS, two great tastes that taste great together, designed for all learners. Some things that we want to make sure that you're asking yourselves are all learners engaging? Are they all learning and perceiving? And can all learners demonstrate and understand? And if the answer to any one of these is no, then the process would be to identify the barrier and proactively remove it for anyone experiencing it. So designing Tier 1 PBIS systems that include all learners actually will result in fewer students needing those advanced tier interventions, and hopefully fewer students needing referrals for more restrictive and more invasive kinds of interventions. So today we're going to focus on two primary aspects of Universal Tier 1 PBIS. We're going to be digging into and looking more closely at how to identify and define the school-wide and classroom expectations. And we're going to be looking at how to design and teach those expectations and routines, applying that universal design for learning lens. In order to design clear expectations for all, the first thing that we need to do is to make sure expectations are accessible. That's how we make them truly universal. UDL reframes expectations as teachable skills, not just rules or things that are put in place that students need to be compliant with. Designing for learner variability should be designed for from the start. And we're going to talk to you all and give you some examples of ways that these things have been put in place with some Tier 1 universal expectations. So in traditional PBIS, school-wide PBIS, teams start by identifying and defining 5 or fewer school-wide expectations. And these expectations are things that are valued by the school community, that are identified by the school community. And in this example, they've identified be respectful, solve problems, and make good decisions as 3 core behavior expectations for this particular campus. Once the expectations are identified, then they're broken down and defined based on specific areas of the campus and specific routines. So in this example, you see be respectful on the play structure, blacktop and field, looks like taking turns, allowing everyone to play, and using the equipment correctly. This matrix of expectations is an example of a traditional PBIS matrix that you would see. Once the expectations are defined and broken down, then normally they're posted around the campus. They're taught and reviewed on a regular basis. This is another example of a school-wide behavior matrix where they use the actual mascot of the campus, which in this case is the tiger, to help define and identify the expectations. So teamwork, integrity, goals, empathy, and responsibility. And they're broken down by the area of the campus or the routine across the school day in the same way. Go ahead, Emily. So in thinking about universally designing the expectations, we know that we have a large percentage of students on our campuses who are neurodivergent. Neurodiversity is a part of the human experience, and there are lots of students on any given campus who may be experiencing the campus, the world, from a sensory perspective in a little bit different way. So designing with neurodiversity in mind designing neurodiversity affirming expectations. We want to make sure that we're shifting the expectations from how behavior must look to the actual goal of the behavior or skill. So we have some examples here of some less neurodiversity affirming expectations, things like paying attention, sitting still, having a quiet body, to more neurodiversity affirming, things like use your tools and strategies to help you learn, keep your body and materials in your space, and allow others to learn.
So like Patty was saying about the traditional PBIS, right? We start with these super clear expectations of we are these 3 to 5 expectations. So if we're looking at maybe some examples of that we are safe, we are respectful, we are responsible. This is a really important key feature, and we don't want to downplay this. This is a huge part of PBIS and what makes it work really, really well. But these categories are super helpful, but they're also not always specific enough for every learner. And so that's why we need to take it into a UDL aligned action-based approach as well. And some ways to kind of add some UDL aligned language is if we're looking at we are safe, taking it maybe to that next level of talking about we take care of ourselves and others, we keep our bodies and spaces safe. And we could go even further to make it even more concrete, even more observable. But our goal with this is that we want to use more concrete and specific observable language. We want to make sure we're really emphasizing regulation and care, but not compliance necessarily. We want to make sure we're accounting for that sensory and movement variability. And when we're looking for we really want to make sure we're also focusing on actions, not necessarily tone or body language. We want to make sure we're really affirming multimodal communication styles, make sure that those expectations are really explicit and teachable. And then we also want to make sure we're really normalizing tools, scaffolds, and help seeking, really making sure we're supporting those executive functioning differences and reinforcing strategy use and not just outcomes, right? So if we're looking at we are respectful, we could also add we communicate and we interact with care. We respect differences and boundaries. And some of our students are going to need even more examples, even more description, even more specifics, and we will get into that. But having more specific and concrete language is really important too. For something like we are responsible, we might also say we use strategies to learn and participate, we try, we ask, and we use supports. Again, really affirming that normalization of scaffolds are important, tools are important. We all need strategies. So using those strategies rather than be compliant every single time. So I want to throw out this thought to you. How many rules does an average student track each day? And that might be a little bit different for maybe elementary school and middle school, but something to think about in a classroom, in gym, in library. Maybe we have art class, all kinds of different classes. And some might have things like, these are some examples of what they might see. I'd love to see in the chat, anyone any ideas what the average student, how many rules does the average student track each day? Any ideas in a classroom? Three. Well, those are our PBIS friends. 30, 10, 100, 25. Okay, lots and lots. So the average student follows 27 rules across 3 different classrooms. And so depending on if you have students, middle school students, high school students, a 30-room campus could have up to 150 different rules on a campus. So I'd like for us to think a little bit about students in a classroom, and we're going to give you 4 examples of 4 different human beings in one classroom and what their experience might be. So maybe we have Marcus, who has been diagnosed with autism. He really needs those predictable, clear routines. And when rules change in every room, those transitions are really a source of anxiety, and it no longer becomes a moment for learning because we're just in that anxious state, kind of like in that very first simulation. Amara is an English language learner. She is a newcomer who arrived just 3 weeks ago. She's still learning English. She cannot access the rules that are posted in each classroom because they're written in English. There's no visuals, nothing. She's relying on watching other people, and they're actually also guessing, which is not helpful. Deja is twice exceptional. She has an extremely high reading ability, but she has some working memory challenges. And so tracking those 20 plus different rules across subjects is genuinely exhausting for her. And she's using up all of that energy on just trying to understand the rules or the expectation. Well, they're rules now, they're not expectations yet. And then we also have a substitute teacher, brand new to campus, first time there. He's covering 3 different classes, and he just has absolutely no idea what the expectations are in each room. And students are testing boundaries. There's a lot of chaos, but also because there's not really any boundaries. So we're going to do a little Zoom poll here in a second. But what I'd like you to do is really think about your learning environment and the expectations you have for your learners. We're going to launch a Zoom poll, and I want you to consider how many of your current classroom rules can fit under each of these broader expectations. Be respectful, be responsible, and be safe. So we're going to launch this poll, and I would love to see how many of all of these rules might fit under these broader expectation categories. Okay, you should all see the poll in front of you. Here we go. Okay, lots answers are coming in. You guys are quick draw with it. I love it. Love it. I'm going to give it one more minute because they're continuing to come in. All right. Slow down. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we'll check out the results here. All right. Everyone have access to those results. All right, what we see here is 79% of people said, yes, every single one of my classroom rules would fit under those expectations. 18% said most, and 2% said some. And I saw someone in the chat said, I would add the be kind as well. And I love that. You're right. Being respectful and being kind is different. And that's, I could see how people would merge that together, or it could be separate, but I totally agree. Are there any others that you had in your mind that you're like, they just don't fit there, or one more would be better? Anybody, feel free to add in the chat if there's another one that you're thinking might be a good one to add. And I'd also love to hear if maybe there are any rules. Oh, Jose, I love it. He said, have fun. That is a really, really good one. I love that. Have fun. What a great school expectation. I love that. Thank you. Be a problem solver. Love. Thank you, Janelle. Love that. Okay. Fabulous. These are great rules. Okay. I love this idea of adding more, but I think you can all see that 3 to 5, we probably could get there if we took fun and bring the good vibes and love and lumped those together. I love that. I love the have a good vibes. That's fabulous. Ooh, is it healthy? Love that. Thank you, Sandra. These are amazing. So the reason we really, really focus on this 3 to 5 is that it truly, truly unlocks for every learner this shared language across campus. And it really helps increase that access for our learners to all have access to Tier 1. It's reducing that cognitive load, so we're not thinking about 1,000 rules in our brain, and instead we have some clear expectations, and we can group in some specifics there, but that broad categories of expectations is so crucial for our brains. It's really allowing all of the adults on campus to also have that shared language. And so that consistent reinforcement is the Tier 1 support is when every adult is able to be completely consistent. And then the equity by design is if we can take these super clear expectations and then pair them with explanations in a variety of ways. And we'll get into some specifics of that. So once we have identified and defined our school-wide expectations, now it's time to teach those expectations and practice them. And so this is where we're really going to connect that neuroscience of UDL and think about what it is that learners need in order to engage and perceive and show what we know. So we're going to dive a little bit into this overview here and just think about how this connects to learning expectations, right? So research in neuroscience tells us that every single human brain is unique. We all learn differently. This idea of variability is the norm, right? There's no average way to learn. So all of the children, even the same age, the same grade, the same environment with the same teacher, are going to be processing content differently, and they're going to be learning in a variety of ways. So UDL really connects to this neuroscience to a framework. And what it's looking at here is these three major brain networks that we have that are involved in learning. So the first one is looking at the affective network, which is all about engagement. And our brain, our affective network, is always asking, why do I care about this? Why does this have anything to do with me? So it's connected to motivation, emotions, interests, and whether we feel safe and ready to learn. That's a huge part of that engagement piece. The second is the recognition network, and that's connected to representation strand within the UDL guidelines. And this network is always answering the question, what am I learning, right? So it's how our brain is processing patterns, processing information, making meaning from what we're seeing, hearing, reading. The third is the strategic network, and that connects to action and expression. And this network is going to answer the question, how do I show what I know? And so it involves planning and organizing ideas, communicating, and then demonstrating learning. So when we are able to design our lessons with all three of these in mind, we are really making sure that all of our students can engage, perceive, show their understanding, and this is naturally going to remove barriers and support access for more students. So when we're connecting this to creating those clear tier 1 expectations across a school site through that UDL lens, we want to design them so that all of our students can engage with these expectations, understand them clearly, and then demonstrate their understanding successfully. So we're going to kind of go through this engagement, representation, and action and expression and connect some of the specific considerations within the guidelines to teaching behavioral expectations. So we're going to start with engagement principle, which, like we said, the network is always asking, why does this matter to me? And so if we break down the considerations in the engagement strand of the UDL guidelines, the research is really telling us that students are much more likely to follow expectations when they truly understand the purpose behind them, and when they feel like they're part of a community where those expectations matter. So students are that first piece is really those clear expectations. That is number one, these clear expectations. Students are more motivated when they know exactly what's expected of them. When expectations are posted, they're explicitly taught, they're revisited regularly, then they start to become predictable and fair. And our brains love predictable and fair. We are searching for predictable and fair. The second piece of that is really showing what it looks like. Telling our students the expectations is very rarely enough. In fact, I'm going to say it's never enough. But when we can provide those concrete examples and model across different settings, classroom, hallway, group work, students can actually see what that behavior looks like in action. And that visual and social modeling is really what makes expectations so much more accessible. That third piece is practice and connection. We need repeated opportunities to practice skills. And so in this particular situation, being able to practice the expectations on a campus with peers, not just hear them over and over, but practice them together, have opportunities to reflect together, really build those shared norms together. It's going to strengthen that ownership and belonging within that classroom community. So when we think about expectations through this engagement lens, we're really asking, do our students understand the purpose? Do they see themselves in the community and feel motivated to participate? So if we're switching lenses here to look at this representation principle, that what of learning, that question is going to be, our brains are asking, what exactly am I supposed to understand? And so when we think about PBIS expectations, representation reminds us that students can't follow expectations if they don't understand them. We got to understand it to be able to follow it. So our role as educators is going to be to make these as clear and accessible for every single learner. And there's so much bang for your buck with this. If we're taking the time to make sure all of our learners understand the expectations at a tier 1 level, I know we talked about this last session too, we are naturally going to reduce our tier 2 and tier 3 referrals by a ton. So first idea here is really teaching expectations in multiple ways. It's not just not every student learns from words alone. It's just very rarely do students learn from words alone. You know, most students need to see it, hear it, try it, practice it, discuss it in order to really understand what is expected of them. And so this is going to include things like visuals and short videos, modeling, role play, and having this variety. It's going to remove some barriers and make it easier to perceive. It's also naturally going to be more fun and engaging. And when we can perceive and we're excited to learn, that's just a winning combo. The second piece is really making sure you're reflecting your community. This representation piece is huge. Students connect more deeply with these expectations when the examples and the scenarios that we're using feel relevant and familiar to them. When students see their own experiences, their own selves, their cultures, their communities reflected in these situations we discuss, the videos we make, the visuals we post, these expectations are going to be more meaningful and authentic. The third idea is really making sure that we're building on what students already know. Like, we know that students have prior knowledge, prior experience to expectations. And so when we connect those expectations to things students already know, we actually make the learning much easier for their brains to organize as well. So when we're looking through this lens and we're teaching those expectations, we're kind of asking ourselves here, are we teaching expectations in a way that makes them clear, meaningful, and understandable for all students? So now we're going to move to this final piece, which is the action and expression piece. And that's asking that question, how do I show what I know? And sometimes the answer, I think, in PBIS or in just any type of behavioral situation is like, well, yeah, they're going to follow the rules. That's how they show what they know. But before we can expect them to fully understand it, we do need to assess some student knowledge and just make sure. So a huge part of that is going to be really thoughtful about the feedback we're providing and really allowing them to demonstrate an understanding of these expectations before it's a full expectation. So the first idea within this action and expression principle is really to think about multiple ways to show our understanding. So students shouldn't be limited to just one method for demonstrating those expected behaviors. Just like in academics, we know some students are much better with oral responses, some with writing, some drawing, role playing, group discussions. And so if we're giving those multiple pathways for demonstrating understanding, we're really going to allow our students to show what they know in a way that works best for them. The second idea is really making sure we're creating supports and scaffolds, and not necessarily as a tier 2 strategy, but tier 1 level. What are the checklists we have available? What are the sentence starters we have? What are the visual cues that we have for our students to be able to show their understanding, to practice what they know? We all need tools and supports. We just do. That's how we learn. It's a good thing. And that third piece is really those clear goals and meaningful feedback, right? So students need to understand what it is they're working towards and get that consistent feedback as they progress. And so our PBIS acknowledgement systems are really going to be connected to that specific and measurable behavior. So they know exactly what it is they're supposed to be doing. They can track their own growth, all of that fun stuff. And so we're really asking ourselves, are we giving students the tools, the supports, and the multiple pathways that they need to demonstrate these expected behaviors successfully? And I think one of the most important things to think about is when we're teaching expectations, before we can expect our students to really demonstrate their understanding, they need to see it, they need to hear it, they need to talk about it, and they need to try it. And if you take nothing else from this, I think this is the real crux of it, because we got to make sure they truly understand what these expectations are. So we're going to go back to this engagement strand, and we're just going to break down each of these sections and show you some examples of really great ways that schools have really increased engagement, representation, and action and expression when it comes to creating their PBIS expectations. And so as we're looking at some of these examples, think about the ways they've made these expectations really clear, the way they've really shown what it looks like, and the way students really have that opportunity to practice and connect in these examples. So I'm going to pass it back to Patty, and she's going to share some awesome examples.
Thanks, Emily. All right, so what you see in front of you are some example and non-example photos. Sometimes in order for students to know what to do and to be able to discriminate what is expected from what is unexpected, we actually need to teach the expected and unexpected version of things. So they know exactly where those guardrails and where those lines are. So these are some examples of some visuals that show what the non-example is. So on the left side, the morning lineup, those are some teachers acting goofy. They're not lining up. They're not following the expectation. And then there's an example on the right of where they are engaged in the appropriate expectation of sitting on the circles in the line where they're supposed to be to show that they're ready for the school day to begin. Same with on the left, you see some examples and non-examples. And what I really like about this one is they've incorporated an additional element of color, with green being the good choice or the right choice or the good example of the expectation being followed, and red being the non-example. And those colors are used across all of the expectations to show examples and non-examples. So there's that added element that can help with perception and understanding of the appropriate versus the not acceptable or not appropriate behavior or expectation in those examples. All right, we have an example here of a video, and I'm going to let Emily just show it, and then we'll talk about the elements of UDL and some of the principles that are really highlighted here after we see it.
Hi everyone, we are going to be showing you a skit showing kindness and respect in the lunch area. Enjoy!
Please be kind and don't cut the line. Oh, sorry. Thanks, guys, for being kind. It's kind to follow the rules. Thank you. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Leaders are respectful. Leaders are responsible. Leaders are honest, safe, and kind. Woo!
All right, so that first little segment was demonstrating the non-example, right? You had some students that were trying to move to the front of the line, and the students that were at the front of the line gave them the instruction about what was expected. And they said, be respectful and go to the wait in the line like everyone else does. So you hear that language. It's the students themselves that are demonstrating those expectations. It's in their lunchroom. it's in their context, which makes it really not only engaging, but meaningful to them. And then in the second example, again, we saw the students demonstrating and chanting and talking about their expectations, but they also had hand movements and motions that they paired with each of the expectations. So you're engaging yet another part of the brain in that movement and pairing that with the words, and repeating it and rehearsing it and getting to see themselves engaging in those expectations. And modeling it for their peers that are also watching the videos. Emily, anything else as far as like a UDL element that you wanted to highlight from those examples?
I mean, I just loved all the pieces of it. I think that just the children being able to see themselves in the video, and again, I saw the hand motions too. I love that connection so much. Yeah, just engagement was high and perception was high. Beautiful.
All right, we have another example here. We're just going to show a little bit of this video. And I think that this one really very much highlights the principle of engagement, because they have taken some of the teachers on campus and they've dressed them up in this Minions outfit and videotape them. And the Minions are actually demonstrating the non-example of the expectations. And then you'll see the students demonstrating the example of the expectations. Now, I am going to preface the showing of this video. We're not going to show the whole thing, but if you happen to go back and watch it, towards the end, they have an example of students being told that it's not okay for them to use the elevator unless they need the elevator. And this does not represent universal design for learning. Actually, we want to make sure that students, any student, can access however they need to and want to access. So that just giving that little caveat if you happen to go back and watch the end of this video. But Emily, you want to show a little bit of this?
In the fight for justice, in the halls, there is only one man for the job, Mastermind Gru Ladage, master of disguise.
No, it's really me.
Dove, technological genius. When the halls are crazy, he'll be there to guide you. This school year, hallways have met their match. Hallway expectations.
My minions are impossible. Remember to keep tight to the right and touch every step. Watch these masterminds at work.
All right, y'all get the idea. So example, non-example, video models, but fun and engaging. And what student's not going to pay attention to that? A lot more fun than being told what the expectations are. They get to actually watch the video and see it being represented in a fun and meaningful way. We'll go to the next one. All right, so we have a little activity for you, and we'd like for you to use the chat for this one. So we've got the set of expectations for the restroom on the left labeled A, be safe, be responsible, be respectful, and the expectations on the right for the bathroom, which uses the school's kind of mantra of champs. And we want to know who on your campus might not be able to access example B. All right, we've got English learners. That's right. And non-readers. So TK and K, they aren't yet reading. Okay, younger students. Okay, possibly students with dyslexia or some challenges with reading. The littles, students who are visually impaired. Excellent. What about families? Families are a part of a school community. There might be some families that aren't able to access that information. Yep. Those who can't read, weak reading skills, that's right. So the example on the left really illustrates and demonstrates a principle of UDL. Adding just simple visuals can eliminate the barriers for all of those learners that you said couldn't access on the right. The visuals themselves might allow greater access. Emily, if you'll go on to the next one for me. Someone brought up the visually impaired. So adding visuals isn't going to be a way of being able to make it accessible for people who have visual impairments. But you see the QR code in the scanner. Using a QR reader, there could be audio, there could be a video, there could be alternative language. So you can make your visual posters and your expectations more accessible by adding these elements and designing them in a way that takes into consideration the range and variability of learners on your campus. And thinking about what the barrier is to your current posters and current expectations, and figuring out then how to add these elements to make them more accessible.
So now we're going to kind of switch gears and look at teaching these expectations connected to representation. And we're going to be really thinking about how do we teach these expectations in multiple ways? How do we make sure that we're reflecting our community, really thinking about who our students are, who our families and communities are, and then again, making sure we're building on what students already know. And so some strategies to think about, kind of connected to that, see it, hear it, discuss it, try it. You know, integrating those hand motions, using visuals and videos, live demonstrations, combination of examples and non-examples, using music and repetition, really using it in groups and partners, allowing for that discussion time and that practice time. I love this visual here. It says a great classroom looks, has a list, sounds, has a list, and feels. And I can tell this came from a classroom conversation where the teacher said, hey guys, let's talk about what does a great classroom look like and sound like and feel like. And that's gathering the perspectives and the voice of the students in their classroom. And, you know, she does tiny little visuals, not a huge amount, but I think this is a really good reminder of a conversation. And so they might be able to, even if they are non-readers or not yet reading at that text complexity, they probably still have access because it was something they did as a class. They have that discussion to draw on. And it's also something teachers can reference, like, hey guys, remember this conversation we had? We all agreed that a great classroom looks like this or sounds like this. And right now I'm hearing whatever. What a great way to tie it back to an activity and a discussion and a practice. So we're going to dive into some examples that really show some strategies for when we're thinking about representation. This next one I was actually singing in the bathroom the other day. It is so catchy.
All right. So how many of you guys ever get a song stuck in your head or a jingle from a television commercial or something like that? That's the idea here. So we're going to show this example that is illustrating the expectations in the bathroom.
Go flush, wash, leave. Go flush, wash, leave. Get back to work. Get back to work. Go flush, wash, leave. Go flush, wash, leave. Get back to work. Get back to work. Go flush, wash, leave. Go flush, wash, leave. Get back to work. Get back to work. Go flush, wash, leave. Go flush, wash, leave. Everybody jam out now. Everybody jam out now.
Go, flush, wash, leave. Simple expectations. And now you've got a little jingle that goes along with it. You're going to remember it. Those expectations are going to be easier to access when they're needed and easier to learn. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was first learning my ABCs, I still do it to this very day. I sing the song when I'm trying to alphabetize. So, you know, music a lot of times will help us to be able to recall and remember and access information. So that's a great example of that. All right. Here's another great example of some universally designed expectations. And these are the pickup routine expectations. And this teacher, so amazing, utilized the photos of their actual classroom and their actual walkway and their actual pickup area, and then created these little cartoon characters. I believe it can be animated as well. With the expectations in them. And the little characters actually were modeled after the students in the classroom. So each character represents a different student from that particular classroom. So talk about engaging. Like there's my person on this video, or there's this person on the poster, and they look like me. Janelle said the song's going to be stuck in her head all day. You're welcome. All right, we have another example, and this one is, I think, a really great example of representation. So what you're going to see here is from a program that supports students with extensive support needs. And PBIS is being implemented at the Universal Tier 1 level, even with students who have the most extensive support needs. And what they've done in order to teach the expectations is they've identified their expectations and they've taught them, and they've created hand signals, and they've created a song, and they've got a catchy tune, and they've created a video for video modeling. And you're going to be able to see that here. So Emily, will you show this one for us? I heard a Frogger reference and a Men Without Hats reference all in one webinar and with my people. The 80s, there we go. Yeah, so the song is catchy, the students are seeing themselves, and the motions that they're using and that they're being taught, they actually, whenever they teach and review the expectations on a daily basis, they can use those and use them as a way to help like pre-correct or redirect students whenever they need to have safe hands or they need to show a safe body and give themselves some pressure and a hug to regulate and to calm down. So a really great example there, I think, of representation. Emily, did you want to say anything else about that one?
I think you nailed all of it, but just that really considering who is on your campus and making sure that they are all represented when it comes to those expectations and those videos, and just even if it's pictures on posters, but whatever it is, that representation piece is so powerful and important that all students are included. We knew that was going to happen. Sorry.
All right. I have another example of the expectations being taught to students with some more extensive support needs. And this is part of the morning meeting. So every day as part of the morning meeting, they go through the routine of basically reviewing and demonstrating and practicing and talking about the expectations. And the visuals that you see back there, we're safe, we're responsible, we're respectful, and we're independent. Those are all signals and gestures that they use to support that throughout the day. The visuals themselves, they also have in portable versions. So on like lanyards or on keychains that they can reference to use as pre-correction or redirection and acknowledgement throughout the day. So repetition, teaching in a highly structured way, having it be a part of a predictable routine, and teaching the students to demonstrate an understanding, not just through saying what the expectations are, but by demonstrating the gestures, both within the morning routine in a predictable way, as well as generalized out into the campus whenever they need to actually use the skills. And PBIS is not just for the littles. PBIS is very effectively implemented in middle and high schools. So we have an example showing at the secondary, this is a middle school level, of a video that the students actually created around their expectations.
And just for sake of time, I'll probably do about a minute or so. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
I just noticed time and was like, oh, wow.
We're going to be making about 2,700 bologna and cheese sandwiches.
So it'd be about 291.6 bologna slices. Project 363 is a good example of demonstrating pride at Pioneer Ridge Middle School. So that's an all-school activity where you make sandwiches for people that are homeless in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area.
Pride to me means that you're working hard all the time. You do it with a smile on your face, and it's having fun. You're having fun during school, and when you get good grades, it feels so good.
It's important to have pride. For me, well, at least it's a good reminder to stay on pace in school, to just be a good person in general.
Showing respect for others and having them being able to depend on you.
It's really important while we're doing this work that we are teaching behavior. So just like we would teach academics, we're teaching self-advocacy, we're teaching how do I behave as a good person, right?
I love that she said it's just like teaching academics. We make assumptions that students ought to just know the social, emotional, and behavioral expectations without actually teaching them. And that they can access those whenever they need them. And so I think that this just really drives that point home that these things need to be taught and they need to be rehearsed and they need to be practiced and they need to be acknowledged, no matter what the age. Adults need it too.
I love it. There we go. So when we're the other piece about, just like we've said before, like that repetition piece, that making sure that there is something on the board that is representative of the activities you've had, the conversations that you've had. I love a good chart paper. So a couple of examples of how people have integrated visuals. This first one is so great. Someone used the Fryer model to think about, put the vocabulary word in the middle, and there's a picture of an example, a sentence, a non-example. It's kind of hard to see, but these are things that students spent time and energy working on, and now it's up on the board as a nice reminder. Again, teamwork. So what does it look like? What does it sound like? Our class norms. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? All of the students were a part of creating those. And then there's that visual reminder on the board at all times. And I think it kind of goes back to like, yes, we're presuming competence, but also like, let's pretend they've had amnesia. Let's remind those expectations every single day, because it's just a helpful, friendly thing to do. Really thinking about the languages we're posting things in, and that's going to go back to the variability of your learners, and then also the variability of your families on campus, like Patty was talking about earlier. Depending on who is accessing this and who's going to use this, can everybody access it? I love this Little Llama's TK classroom rules. There's visuals connected, and just those I statements like, I can make safe choices. I use a kind body and words with my teachers and classmates. And this is clearly something that they practice over and over again. Oh, I think you're muted.
There we go. So teaching the expectations. Expectations are not just for the students. The expectations are for the staff as well. And so we have a couple of examples of instruction plans and lesson plans that help the staff know how to support the expectations. On the left-hand side is the hallway transition. And that top part is kind of like the lesson plan to help the teachers prepare the students. And then on the right-hand side are the visual sequences to support the students as a pre-teaching or like a pre-correction, showing them and reminding them of the steps and the expectations before they actually leave the classroom. Same thing here. We've got the visual sequence on the left to remind the students of the expectations for that particular routine. And then on the right-hand side, reminds the staff of how to allow the students to be more independent, which is one of the expectations and goals for this particular school site. We're just reminding the adults how to let the students be more independent by not over supporting them. So the expectations are also for the adults. So being safe, being respectful, being responsible, if those are the expectations, it's up to the adults to create safe learning environments where all students feel that they belong. It's up to the adults to be respectful of student needs, their communication styles, their learner variations, and their responses to the environment. That's being respectful. And being responsible as an adult educator on campus, we're responsible for teaching and acknowledging the social, emotional, behavioral skills and expectations and providing positive corrections for contextually inappropriate behaviors. So when you design your expectations, it's important to really think about what does it mean for the adults to also demonstrate and model and follow those expectations, and what does it mean for us to really embody those values that we're working so hard to teach the students as well.
Switching gears into our last section here and really thinking about how we're teaching those expectations from that lens of action and expression, and how are we providing them multiple ways to show their understanding, making sure we're being really thoughtful about the supports and scaffolds that we make available to everyone, and then how are we providing that meaningful feedback. And I will say our next session is really going to be focused on that feedback piece, so we're not going to dive super deep into that, but that's going to be a big part of our next session. And so a few examples. Gotta call out, love the AAC device with our PBIS expectations in there, so they have access to be able to communicate and utilize those icons when they would like to use them. And then just that really clear expectations being posted on the board, those visual expectations, also with some examples. And then, of course, thinking about that role-playing piece too. We might need to skip this one. What do you think? Should we skip for time? Or do a short clip maybe?
You could probably skip it, Emily. I would
Skip
love
it.
for
Okay.
you to be able to show them
And
the
we've
lesson plan.
Okay. And so this one, if you want to come back to it, there's some good examples and non-examples. And so feel free to check it out. But yeah, I want to make sure we get to everything. And so making sure also we're having these really clear visual expectations. And I love this little checklist here. Do you have your water bottle, your snack, your folder, your washed hands? I mean, how helpful for all students to really be thinking about this. And all of these were actually used by a speech and language pathologist who was going from site to site. And it was like, her students are being expected, they probably see her twice a week, maybe once a week. And so a friendly reminder of those expectations is so incredibly helpful.
So what you see here is an example of some social narratives, which is an evidence-based practice for teaching students with autism, also really effective with all learners. And so don't forget about the use of some of those evidence-based practices that we use, for teaching other things. They can be used to teach the expectations. So you have a social narrative on the bottom there that incorporated a favorite character, and social narratives are written in a very specific way to be able to explain the why and the what of the expectation. But if you develop them, keep them handy, keep them on a key ring, and pull them out and use them not only as a reminder, but maybe as part of the redirection that a student might need whenever they're in the context.
So finally, we want to make sure we share with you a resource. So we're going to be sharing a universal PBIS expectations lesson plan template that was created as part of PCOE, California PBIS, and Open Access together. And so the goal of this is really to help educators very much explicitly teach those behavior expectations, but make sure that we are really being inclusive, engaging, and accessible for all learners. So it's really grounded in that UDL of being able to ensure that our learners are engaging, perceiving, and showing their understanding in a way that works for them. So having that variety of options for those things, and then making sure that we're really introducing and revisiting those expectations throughout the school year. So I'm going to show you a couple of pieces of it, and then I'll make sure I share the template as well. So you'll see in the home-based document, there's also examples from cafeteria, bus, and hallway. That's the high school level. And these are just some examples of like being really thoughtful about explaining why these expectations are important, why they matter, really thinking about when we're teaching these expectations, how are our learners going to see it, hear it, try it. This template doesn't have discuss it. We kind of lumped that into hear it, but you could add discuss it if you wanted to as well. Really having a list of different ways we might allow our students to practice and understand these expectations. And then another piece is for teams to really think at the end, okay, after we taught these expectations, how did it go? Were there any barriers that we did not proactively remove? And how can we remove them next time? And so the link, some people maybe someone will throw it into the chat. It's going to be a forced copy, but what you'll see is a lesson plan that allows you to really think about those expectations in the setting, thinking about why those expectations matter. How are they going to practice? There's some specific examples of how your learners might practice, an option for you to create a team plan. Think about what strategy you might use and what steps you might utilize. And I think the piece that's really important for this is you might think about, TK through first grade is going to do a read aloud or a picture book, but second through third grade is going to do a game and a quiz. And so you might have different grade levels doing different practice scenarios, and you can plan that all out here. And then really thinking about how are you going to know your students understand the expectations before they're officially expectations. And so really coming up with a plan of how you're going to assess that. And then that reflection piece as well. So a copy of that is in the home-based document as well as examples to go along with that. And it's also linked in the slide deck as well. So please make sure you check that out. And then our intentional close for you today is to really, really think about your campus. If you're already utilizing PBIS, who has access to those tier 1 expectations, who is not able to access those right now, and then what barriers are existing on campus, and what are some strategies that you might use to remove some of those barriers. So feel free to think about that, add it to the chat. But I know we also do want to have some time for questions too. So we'll kind of balance that out depending on questions, I guess.
Yeah, that would be great if folks can drop their questions in the chat while also responding to the closing activity. I have a few questions to get us started while folks are thinking. There were the task analysis that were shared. Is there access to those?
I can absolutely give access to some of the pre-created. Also, if anyone is using or has access to the unique curriculum, they have visual task analysis galore that are part of that. And a lot of your speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists may have access to figure sticks. There's lots of free and available resources for the task analysis and visual supports that are out there also. Symbol sticks.
Great. Thank you for that. There was just another question for those who are educators in high school setting. How different could or should PBIS for all look in the high school setting?
I actually dropped a link to PBIS for high schoolers in the chat. And, really the same principles are going to apply. You need to think about what are the barriers and what could you do to basically design in a way that that helps all or more students access. But for high schoolers, the expectations might be you might have more than 3, you might bump it up to 5, and the sophistication may be a little bit bumped up, right? But really the basic principles of PBIS and the basic principles of UDL are going to apply no matter what age group we're talking about.
Patty and Emily, have you had experience with high school students being involved and having agency in the development of their PBIS programs at their high school?
Absolutely.
I have not, so I'm going to pass that to Patty.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I mean, that should be taking place across the board, even at the elementary level, but super essential at high school. Leadership classes can, kind of take the lead on how we're going to roll out the teaching. We've had, campuses that have the morning news, the PBIS expectations become part of that. If they have audiovisual classes, doing the design of the videos themselves. If they have music classes, the music that can come along with the videos. We even had one campus, actually, they had a contest for whoever could design the best rap around the expectations. And so there was like a rap competition. So there's so many awesome and amazing ways to be able to engage the high school students within PBIS. And it's a way more powerful come middle and high school for it to come from and through the peers than from and through the adults. Although they really do like when the adults volunteer themselves for some of the drawings. We'll talk about that more next time, but a good old-fashioned pie in the face of the principal can be really motivating for those kids.
Yeah. I was a middle school teacher who we had students on our team as representatives from students because their perspective is very different from what we're experiencing and seeing as adults, and their contributions to what students would actually be engaged in is also really different from what we perceive as adults. So
yeah,
it's really helpful to have student voice on our team.
And I want to again, reiterate, like not just at the high school level.
Right. All levels. Absolutely. Well, we are right at time, and I know that there are more questions coming in, so perhaps we can take some of these questions and embed them into session 3, which we hope to see all of you join us back again for session 3. Thank you so much, Patty and Emily. You managed to take quite a complex topic and make it super accessible with great examples in just 1 hour and 15 minutes, which is remarkable. So everyone, thank you for being here today. We want to just leave you with one reminder to just think about this and invite you to shift instead of thinking and asking, why isn't the student responding? We might ask, how can we design the system so that students can respond successfully? And as you leave, consider one area of Tier 1 system expectations, routines, or instructions and ask, where might there be barriers and how could UDL and PBIS help remove them for all of our learners? Don't forget to complete the post-session survey in the chat. The recording of this session will be available soon and will be added to the home-based document and our YouTube channel. The certificate of completion link is also being dropped in the chat and will be available on the home-based document. On behalf of all 3 of our teams, thank you for your commitment to designing systems where every learner can succeed. Have a great night, everyone.